This meeting is being recorded.
The way we love to start every meeting is good morning, good afternoon, good night. And today we will also say to all of you and also to Karina's cat. Thank you. We are very welcome. We are welcome your cat. We want her presentation on the last his presentation on the last time we are meeting. So today we have a very important guest with us, Bill Kaplan from US, from Washington, Professor Bill Kaplan. But before we start speaking today about Agile, I want to remind you that we are trying to build some teams here, teams that can speak between the courses, between the sessions, and teams that can share information on projects that are important to them. I will show my screen for a minute. Some of you have sent me their ideas as to projects or challenges that they wish were, or that they are involved with, may I say that best, that they are involved with. And here you can see 7 different themes. I'm dealing with content strategy. I'm dealing with nurturing claim culture. I want to put focus on the critical knowledge. I want to put focus on tools, whether internet tools or other sharing tools. I want to put the emphasis on the claim strategy, on knowledge retention, or I am now starting the journey with one of the organizations, starting to map the needs, building the strategy, maybe a guerrilla strategy, maybe a top-down strategy, and I don't even know what will be the specific subject. So if it's the most easiest thing is, I'll put this picture on the WhatsApp. You can send me your numbers or reply privately with a number 1 to 7 or a number and the details if you're afraid that I'll miss it. And someone who doesn't want to eat any of these can send me without another number 8 or a question mark and some other topic. But please, please, please send me one topic that you think is important for you, one of these or one of the others ones, the other ones. So we don't have too much time because we also have a very, very intense session today, and I'll stop sharing my screen in a minute because I'll pass it to Bill. Bill is going to speak with us. Professor Bill Kaplan, I'm sorry. Dear Bill, is going to speak with us about about Agile. But he won't speak about Agile in general. He even won't speak about Agile particularly. He'll go and be focused on Agile for KM strategy development. So we want to think about Agile as an approach for all kinds of Agile needs, of all kinds of KM needs. Today, instead of speaking only about the approach, we will see a demonstration of the approach, why it's important and how it's implemented on a KM strategy. Later on, we can generalize it and go back again and ask ourselves, where can it be implemented in other KM activities? So Bill, I'm stopping the share and please, you may start sharing your screen. You are a co-host. We are all listening.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Pull this up.
And people, please send me everything on WhatsApp and not on this chat, because this chat later on will close, and if I have too many channels, I'll lose everything. So send it to me one-on-one on the WhatsApp. I'm going to send the picture, reply privately, and I'll get it. Thank you. Oh, I see people have already been sending me. Thank you.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right, let's get going here.
Hey, just one moment, Bill. I'm going to mute everyone and unmute yourself. So, it's already done. You can continue.
Still see it?
Yeah.
Mariah?
Yes, we are with you.
All right. Hey, good morning from the US. It's 5 something in the morning. I'm glad to be here with you guys. Mariah, thank you. I think this is wonderful for a global connection. It's just continues to fascinate me how we're able to actually do things like this. So let's get going. One of the things I want to start with is a view or a definition of knowledge. It's not the only one. There's many. I created this about 15 years ago when I was in a conference. Someone asked me if I could define knowledge, and it kind of stumped me. And you all are members of many forums. There's a lot of theoretical discussions. But when I talk to clients, when I talk to business people, when I talk to people in operations, this view of knowledge seems to resonate. It's very simple. I think it addresses what we're going to talk about, and I found it useful over the years. So if you think of knowledge as 2 components, information, which is explicit and codified, and experience, which is personal and tacit, the things that you know, who you contact, all those things, and you're able to focus those, all the information and all the experience in an organization. That's knowledge. And when you're able to do that effectively through any kind of a knowledge management project or program, you provide value to your customers or your clients. You provide value to the workforce from the perspective of being able to provide them with the knowledge tools that they need in order to do the job and deliver your mission, and value to the organization in terms of the brand that you're trying to represent. You're able to then come up with better solutions to new challenges and to make better decisions about which solutions you want to use. Many of you are consultants. Many of you are responsible, I understand, for the internal knowledge management focus in your organizations. These are some of the reasons for not having a knowledge management strategy. And with knowledge management, the importance of a strategy, and we'll talk about this, is if you don't know where you are, you won't be able to figure out where you're going. But a lot of organizations, a lot of people, these are the reasons. Don't have time to slow down and do this. You can read all of these. The one that I think is the most critical is that leadership lacks appreciation for the impact of change to an organization, and how the ability to effectively and quickly leverage knowledge to improve performance and deliver the mission, how important that is to the organization in those 3 areas of customer, workforce, and organization. So when I talk about KM strategy and what I do with clients and when I talk to organizations, when I provide classes on KM strategy, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. Let me say that there's a lot in this presentation. In fact, it actually constitutes a 1 or 2 day course. After we're done, please feel free to reach out to me over however long it takes, and I'll be glad to answer your questions and even set up phone calls to answer questions with you guys, Zoom calls. So successful KM strategy and its implementation is a fundamental focus of understanding the business and operational environment and the KM environment. You need to understand why the business exists, why the organization exists, what it does, what its mission, how it does that mission. And then you need to understand the knowledge management environment. Is it beginning? Is it on its way? Is it mature? How does the organization understand and use knowledge, the use and flow of knowledge across that organization? And the KM strategy must be fit for purpose, meaning that it's got to be bespoke. It's got to be designed to support that particular organization. Now, while the methodology I'm going to talk about is consistent across organizations, the actual outcome or the strategy will be different, and it has to be different. If you've been on forums, you see people say, hey, what's the strategy? Can you guys give me a strategy to do this? The answer is, yeah, but there's a lot of things you need to understand, and fundamentally, you need to understand the operational environment and the KM environment. We look at 5 focus areas. We look at people and culture. We look at processes, both business and knowledge management. We look at enabling technology and tools. We look at content and content management. And very importantly, we want to understand KM governance. how does the organization sustain their investment in knowledge management and continue to adapt to change and move forward. The approach on the right is pretty straightforward. We have a kickoff meeting. You'll see that in the Agile approach. This really aligns both our team, the consulting team, and the client or organization team to make sure we're all focused on the same outcomes and requirements, because we know from the time that you actually start to talk about a strategy and you actually begin to implement it, things can change. We spend time understanding the BOE and the KME. The next thing we do from that research and interviews, whatever it takes, we then create a knowledge management environment baseline. You know, what is the current state? We get the organization to agree to that we do understand it. We then hold what we call a visioning workshop, where we sit down with the key leadership team and we understand what their view of knowledge management is. Said another way, what does good knowledge management implementation look like in our organization? What are their expectations? We compare what they say they're looking for with what the baseline is. We come up with a gap analysis. We develop a strategy to close the gaps, which is the what. We then develop an implementation plan for the how. And then, as we'll talk about as we go through this, we select pilot projects to demonstrate the value of the recommended strategy to ensure that it is a fit for the culture and operational focus of that organization. Now, many of you are familiar with this approach. I call this traditional KM strategy and framework development. For many organizations, this is the way they want to go. It actually, I'll say, spreads it spreads the strategy development work over a longer period of time. Depending on the size of the organization, it could take 6 to 12 months to develop the actual strategy, and then 6 or more months to actually implement the pilots, learn from those pilots, and then make corresponding changes in the ongoing strategy. These times are not firm, but the sense what I want you to walk away with is that this takes longer and allows organizations to spread their resource and focus over time. You can see that it follows what we just talked about. Understand the business and operational environment, understand the KM environment, gap analysis, develop a strategy, then pick pilots. Over the years, organizations said, we don't want to take that long. And I'm simplifying it, but they didn't want to take that long to do this. And so we developed a strategy approach where we start with the pilot project. We start with the challenging process within the organization. And we look to focus on the highest, with the client, the highest business value in the shortest amount of time. Rapidly and repeatedly evaluating practically applied concepts, strategic and implementing practices in real time. We're actually building the airplane while we're flying it. And that's where the Agile piece comes in and is so important. We continuously want to refine the context of that organization. I say 12 to 14 weeks, could be 10 to 12, could be 14 to 16. The takeaway is that it's not the traditional waterfall. There's a lot of things going on. And the key here is that the organization, and there are not a lot of organizations that will take this approach because it requires an incredible amount of focus and resources upfront over a much shorter period of time. One of the things I like to point out is that when we do consulting, when we do knowledge management strategy, even when I was the chief knowledge officer for that consulting company in the early 2000s, the goal is to do it on a non-interference basis. You don't want the knowledge management effort to make everything else grind to a halt and distract from the business, which is why it would take a longer period of time to actually do it the waterfall way. And this, you got a commitment from the organization that they are going to focus the resources, the time, the money, the people, everything in order to be able to do this in such a short period of time. And then finally, any knowledge management strategy must be part of the business. The business must be part of a business strategy, which is grounded in the organizational strategy. And many of you understand this. The reason is that When it's part of the business strategy, which is grounded in an overall organizational or corporate strategy, knowledge management gets the light. It's a message from leadership that it's important. And if you remember when in the beginning, when we first started talking about this, one of the great reasons that knowledge management strategies don't turn out as expected is because there's not leadership commitment and there's not a focus on knowledge management as a fundamental part of the direction that the organization needs to go in. So these are some of the principles that have come out of the work that we've done. We want to satisfy the client. And if you're an internal consultant, this still applies to you. If you're responsible for the development of a strategy and organization based on your role, you still want to satisfy the organization through early delivery of a sustainable KM framework. And that's the pilot projects that demonstrates that. You're welcome to change requirements at any time through the scrums that you go through. This is co-delivery of a KM project. Whether I'm doing it or you're doing it internally, you're not doing it to the organization, you're doing it with the organization. When you first start out, look for the early adopters in the organization, those people that are willing to make that a commitment or have that significant business or operational challenge where the ability to quickly capture and reuse knowledge makes a measurable difference in the outcome of that business or practice, department, or organization. You have to pay continuous attention to culture and workforce dynamics. That's important because every knowledge management project is a change project. And as I look at the schedule, Moira is going to be talking about implementing Agile routines and change management. So it's absolutely critical that you're willing to accept change, new requirements, and adapt as you work through this Agile approach. It's a mindset. You got to make it as simple as possible. Technology, very often organizations want to jump to the technology solution. It's never the solution, it's an enabler. And this is my perspective. Some of you may not necessarily agree with that, but that's what I found over time. And then you have to reflect and regularly adjust team behavior and execution according to the change in the organization and the feedback that you're getting. So we're going to go into each of these columns, but let me just give you the overview so you can see where we're going. You can see the weeks, you can see the sprints. On the top, what we're looking for in an Agile KM strategy is KM results, however they are defined by that leadership team and that organization. And what we're looking for, what they're looking for, the outcome we want, are new ways of performing and learning. Perform, learn, reinvest, make changes, continuously improve performance. This is valuable either as the development of an initial strategy or you're renewing a strategy that may not have turned out the way that you wanted it. And so before you even start the strategy, one of the things that we do is ATP is authority to proceed. So from when you get the okay to start working and the planning, you're going to do a lot of research on your own before you even begin to interact on a regular basis with the organization. You plan the project, you do your advanced research, you figure out the logistics of it. Prior to COVID, the logistics involved a lot of face-to-face. And while virtual is talented, it's important, it can work, my belief is that face-to-face with the client or the organization, externally or internally, is absolutely critical because there's only so much that you can pick up from a virtual conversation. Really focused on three things: developing new possibilities. How can KM or strategy make a measurable difference in the organization? You want to change the mindset about strategy and its implementation. You want to talk about how you can integrate knowledge management into the work stream to make it part of the way the organization works. I found over the years that when knowledge management is viewed as something extra as opposed to integrated and integral to the work and operation of the organization, it tends to fail over time because people view it as extra work. And then what are the new capabilities that you have because you have an ongoing and sustainable strategy? So we'll go into each of these. The outcome is a multi-year knowledge management strategy and a roadmap that you can then implement throughout the organization from the Agile approach. Planning. You get the authority to proceed, you do your research, this is where you start to identify who the key stakeholders are. Who are the thought leaders in the organization? Where are the challenges in the early adopters where people are willing to build knowledge management into their workflow as part of the way they work? Said another way, they're willing to work on developing a knowledge management strategy, and the pilot project or pilot projects are a representation of a really good place to start. You talk to the people, and this is where the face-to-face really comes in and makes a difference, is you get user stories. They provide you with context for the problems and challenges that are going to drive pilot selection. And then you understand the change challenges. As I said, and as you know, most, if not all, knowledge management projects or implementations are change management problems and challenges as well. And then I don't use this all the time, depending on the size of the organization, but we develop what we call a knowledge flow and use survey. The idea behind this is that this survey helps to point you to areas where you want to focus, where you want to do additional research, where you want to really dive in deep with people that provide this insight. And this helps you to provides you with context for how you actually want to implement those pilot projects, and then ultimately how you want to integrate knowledge management into the knowledge management strategy into the organization. So the outcome of the planning phase is a quick start, understand the business and operational environment, and understand the knowledge management environment, and get yourself prepared to hit sprint one. Sprint one, you want to create the outcome here is a clear line of sight between knowledge management and its value and the work that people are doing. So you're going to integrate with the key stakeholders and pivotal work teams. You're going to identify with the client organization or the part of the organization and agree on where the quick wins and pilots are. And really importantly, and don't ever forget this, is you need to understand how you're going to declare success. If there are no measures of success, it's, I would say, virtually impossible to sustain knowledge management because there's no way to do it. You'll either know that you've met the requirements and you're delivering to the outcomes and the expectations, or you're not. You're going to have a discussion around how KM impacts performance, however that's measured. And importantly, you're going to gain commitment from that part of the organization that's willing to take on the pilot. And this is your license up and down the chain to implement knowledge management. You're going to leverage the survey. You're going to conduct targeted interviews based on that survey. You're going to integrate with the client knowledge management team. And if they don't have one, you're going to begin the development one of an internal team so that when you're done, the organization is able to sustain all of this work. And you're going to provide just-in-time knowledge management training, because in sprint one, you're teaching the team how to actually understand and implement key knowledge management techniques. You're going to teach them learning before doing, peer assists. You're going to teach them how to do action reviews. You're going to teach them how to do retrospects. This is where you start to focus on the new possibilities based on all of this. And so in sprint one, and it could be 1 to 3 weeks, could be 1 to 4 weeks, whatever. The point is you're really getting going and you're demonstrating and getting buy-in for the value of this Agile approach. And by providing that just-in-time training, some of the fundamentals will be the same as we talked about. You know, how do you capture knowledge singly? How do you capture it in groups? How do you distill that knowledge and turn that into learned lessons or critical knowledge to be reinvested in the process? Because in fact, what you're doing is you are working on improving that particular process or solving that particular challenge and demonstrating how an ongoing use and capture and ongoing use of knowledge can make a measurable difference in the organization. In sprint two, you're focused on changing performance as part of that pilot project where you're demonstrating the value of knowledge management. And in organizations, there are different levels of knowledge sharing. This is a function of culture. It's a function of the individual. It's a function of so many different things. But this is where you're carefully guiding the organization to understand the value of knowledge sharing behavior. Again, you're continuing the just-in-time knowledge management training that the team that you want. You're beginning to change behavior, and you want to be able to continue to do this throughout the project and then after the KM effort is over. You're applying these to the work processes as we discussed. Knowledge is being shared, transferred, and applied. They're starting to make changes in the practice and the process over how they do this. They may be making real-time changes to how a manufacturing process, a strategy process, any kind of operational process or practice. And the value here, and because you've got solid measurement, results are becoming visible. People are glad to invest their time if they can see specific and defined results. They get to feel it. And this is really what drives the behavior change, is the feeling that they're making progress and they're actually seeing it, either however the measures are, decrease in time, decrease in costs, improvement in revenue, whatever. And as you know, in order to share knowledge, in order to continue any knowledge management program, you've got to see value and you've got to trust. And so value and trust increase. These, again, the outcome are changes in performance and changes in knowledge sharing behavior. So you've been moving through this pilot project or pilot projects. You've brought the team along. You're teaching them you're teaching them knowledge management tools and practices. And you're starting now to generate and capture key learnings from pilots. So you're looking back over the one pilot or the many pilots, and you're asking these questions. What were we trying to do? Did we do it? How do we know we did it? For those of you familiar with retrospects, you know what's coming. What was effective and why was it effective? What turned out differently from what we expected when we began the Agile approach and we'd started doing the KM pilot projects? And based on what turned out differently, what changes do we want to make? Because it's the learnings from these individual pilot projects that are going to enable those pilot teams to go back and make changes to an overall strategy for the organization. You're sense making, you're characterizing the results from the pilots in terms of lessons learned, but you're doing that in terms of, you're characterizing it in the lexicon of that particular organization, which is why when people talk about, give me a knowledge management strategy, it really doesn't work that way. You can't just clone it. Learnings are shared in context, integrated with the consultant experience, meaning the consulting team. And if you, either as a consultant or you come into an organization and you're going to become an internal consultant or you're going to run the knowledge management program, you bring with you experience. You bring with you the experience of all the other projects you've done, and you're helping the team by integrating those learnings and experience and helping them to make sense out of what they've just done. You're starting to put meat on the bone here in terms of redesigning or designing and developing the KM strategy, framework, and success measures, meaning you're looking out from the pilots to what can we share across the organizations. And the reason this is important, and it goes back to how you pick the pilot projects, and I forgot to mention this, so let me just digress a bit. When you select a pilot project, there are 5 things which I have found to be particularly important. It's got to have a business impact, meaning there has to be visibility. You're going to be making a change, repeatable business, technical, or operational processes that need improvement. And by demonstrating the implementation or the integration of quote unquote knowledge management tools and practices as part of workflow, you're going to see a measurable change in the outcome. There has to be business advocacy. You know, as we talked, leadership has got to focus on this, and the team has to be committed to doing this. The outcomes need to be transferable and reach across the organization. They have to be feasible. Again, for the Agile approach, there is a huge amount of upfront focus, which in fact may actually make what they're doing take longer, but in the end, it ends up becoming something that's much more valuable for the organization. So when we talked about waterfall, we want to do it as much of a non-interference with operations as possible. With Agile, you're clearly saying there may be an impact. Are you guys willing to commit to this? And then there has to be a relationship to the strategic objectives. Why would you do a knowledge management, any kind of knowledge management effort, if you can't tie it to the business strategy and the corporate strategy of the organization? So the outcome here is the KM framework. You looked at people and culture. You looked at processes, enabling technology and content, new ways of working, and how might you implement this more broadly across the organization? I have found that those 5 areas tend to generally cover 95% of what an organization needs to understand and how they work with a knowledge management strategy. There are always little extra pieces that you'll come across, and you'll integrate those in. That's part of the change in Agile process. There's trade-offs with the Agile approach. You're focusing on people and practices. You're focusing on workflow. You're focusing on how knowledge is used and flows across the organization, as opposed to just saying, I bought a book, we're going to do a strategy. You're not doing it in a vacuum. You're doing it on an ongoing basis. You're interested in performing and learning and making changes in how you perform and learn over static high-level processes and tools. It's collaboration. It's a co-delivery approach. And you're responding and adapting to change over having a perfect plan. Good enough's the enemy of perfect. And the idea is that you're adapting to change as you work through each of the phases of the Agile approach. So, Moira, how did you want to handle this piece? Let me just explain what I'm looking for you to do. So many of you, I'm sure, have already had exposure to Agile. You may in fact be experts in doing Agile. I put up on here the Agile principles that we talked about and the trade-offs. What I'd like you to do is think through what we just discussed. I know I went through it quickly, but think through that and suggest other ways of integrating Agile concepts into KM activities. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the strategy level, but I think the principles and the trade-offs and the approach that we talked about, the ability to adapt on the fly, is effective in other parts of the organization where you're doing knowledge management. So Moira, how did you want to handle that?
No, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Okay, guys. So as usual, I am now sharing the link for our slide. I'm putting it on our chat to everyone, to everyone in the meeting. And here we have the link. Now we will be breaking out to breakout rooms, and we will have, let's say, 12 minutes. And on these 12 minutes, you are requested. I'll share the screen for a moment, and you'll see the request. Yes, continue. I'll share my screen. You are supposed to suggest ways of implementing Agile in other care activities. We will now show the past half an hour how to implement the Agile approach. Also, we got a great explanation. What is the Agile approach? And what are the Agile principles? Now, what we're trying to do is to take these understandings and to implement them into additional KM activities. So you see the question, please suggest ways of implementing Agile in other KM activities. And we have here a reminder of the activities themselves. I will now take us back I'll stop sharing, and I'll put us into breakout rooms. And each room, please think together, speak together, brainstorm together, communicate, collaborate, co-create together your ideas how to implement the Agile approach in additional KM activities based on your experience or your learning today or other understandings. So here we go. If there are any questions, I'm staying here in the main room, in the lobby.
No, Bill.
No,
Can you share your screen, please?
Yeah, I'm going to do it again. That's why I was asking. I wasn't sure if it was actually sharing.
Yeah, can see it
Yes.
now. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So here's some advice, and then we'll go back over anything. The organization sets the priorities based on the culture of the organization, the dynamics of the workforce. That has to do with how does it operate, how does it use knowledge, how does knowledge flow, and the business or operational problem to address where leveraging knowledge will have a measurable difference in business performance or mission outcome. Knowledge management fundamentally is about continuous performance improvement, and anything other than that, I think, kind of takes you off track. Now, whether you're an outside consultant or you're an internal consultant, or you're responsible for or coaching the KM implementation in an organization, you work side by side with the organization, with the team. You may also even, in fact, have an internal KM organization, and you're using an agile approach for a strategy reset, working from small outward to larger. And what the focus is, you want to determine the most effective way to deliver the highest value business outcome through the evolving KM framework in the shortest amount of time. Said another way, where you quickly show results and demonstrate the value of changes or that you're making in your strategy, or that the strategy that you're developing, if you didn't have one, actually can return the outcomes and expectations that the organization wants. And this is really important. And that goes to the difference between the waterfall implementation and the agile implementation. You've got to tie KM strategy and implementation to the operational needs, or what we call the operational tempo of the organization. Because if they want to take on agile and they lose sight, or they just don't want to spend the upfront time, then it's going to turn out very badly. And finally, in any strategy, knowledge management, waterfall, traditional, or agile, knowledge management programs or implementations, whatever they are and wherever they are, will succeed and be much more sustainable, or have a greater chance of success and be much more sustainable if you can demonstrate the results. And it's when seeing the value of the implementation, for people who don't even understand what knowledge management is, but they see a change in what they're doing, they're able to do their job better, or they're able to deliver the mission of the organization more effectively. It's the results that change mindsets and behaviors, because knowledge management projects are also fundamentally about changing the behavior of the organization, so that knowledge sharing, collaboration, building in milestones for learning before, during, and after become part of workflow, so that knowledge management and everything that you're doing isn't considered extra work. It's considered part of the workflow. So for example, if you're building a project plan, you would want to build milestones in any project or practice or area, to take the time to learn before, during, and after, to take the time to reflect, to take the time to reinvest the learning in that particular process or practice. So you meet people where they are, not where you'd like them to be.
Just a minute, Bill. I'm going to mute everyone, so and unmute yourself, because we have some noise. So just a moment, please. Wait a minute. You'll see yourself muted, and we will unmute again. Where are we? Mute all.
So
I asked.
Can we do some questions? Yeah, if there's any.
Yes. If anyone wants to ask a question, that's the time. This is the time. If not, we'll go through the slides.
Okay.
Well, there have been some questions before in the chat, and they're all gone now.
Oh, okay. So I'll help out with these questions. What are some of the metrics that you agree upon to measure success in a sprint?
Well, you're going to have overall metrics for the project, and then the team is going to decide what each of the metrics are for the different sprints. I mean, this is not something that's standard. You're going to, as part of the project planning and engaging with those stakeholders and teams, you're going to decide what the measures of success are to determine if in fact you're moving to the next sprint. I mean, you're going to do the sprint, but if you want to keep this thing moving forward, you're going to have agreed on what those measures of success are. And you may find that as you work through the project and you work through each of those different weeks and each of those different sprints, you may be changing the outcomes or the areas of focus and the measures of success. That's the ability to adapt to change and not be focused on, what's the word I'm looking for? Not focused on...
Redetermined.
Yeah, adapting to change over a perfect plan.
Great, thank you. Another question that Jayadatta asked from India, can you please specific proven practices for fast learning?
Yeah, when I talk about fast learning, and many of you are familiar from the things you've read in the different forums, we're talking about learning before, learning during, and learning after. The peer assists, the action reviews, and the retrospects. You're using those as part of working through knowledge management and your workflow. So in the beginning, you're going to find out, and I'm simplifying this, what else has been done in this area within the organization or from your outside contacts. You're going to bring people in, you're going to review your plan. It's not an approval, it's this is what we're going to do. How can you help me do this better? If you've done this, what have you learned that I might not see? You implement your project. As you work through the project, you take these action review sessions at whatever timeline you decide you want to do it, daily, weekly, however. You're asking 4 questions. What are we trying to do? Are we doing it? If we're not doing it, what do we need to do differently? And how do we do that right now to get back on track? And then at the end, you do the retrospect, you sit down with the team. It's facilitated with someone who's not part of the team necessarily. And you ask, what were we trying to do with this project? What are the objectives? How do we know we met those objectives or didn't meet them? If we didn't meet them, if we did, what were we doing that was effective and why was it effective? And if things turned out differently, what would we want to do different next time? Turn those into action items. You share those across the organization. And this becomes part of an evolving knowledge base. Now I zipped through that and simplified it, but did I answer the question about the tools? There's just 3 of them. There's more, but that's just the fundamental 3. And if you have questions on this, reach out to me afterwards. I'll have my stuff at the end here.
Thanks, Bill. It was really, really educating, teaching, inspiring. And above that, we have all this bank, a great catalog of ideas that I already looked through in these slides, and we don't have time to show them all. But first of all, having people working on them, thinking about them together, and later on the ability to use them, that will help us all. And of course, even though you are an expert, I'm sure it can help you as well. So dear people, next week we will meet again. We will speak about change management. I'm sure that everyone has already dealt with change management. We'll try to take it to a new level. Not only know that there's Kata and that there's the ADKAR approach, or methodology, we're going to take it and blend it all together and try taking us to have more advanced knowledge management or change management programs. A few weeks ago, I've read Nick Milton and Stephanie Bernard's book saying you have to understand, one of the principles is to understand that KM is a change management program. So that will be our topic next week. To those who didn't see, we put a piece from the Forbes speaking about Agile KM on our WhatsApp team. So everyone, go enjoy doing KM the coming week, smile doing KM, and we will meet you in 1 week from now. So good morning, good day, good afternoon, good night to you all, and to Karina's cat. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye, Karina's cat. Bye bye, everyone. Moria. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Bill, so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Bill. Bye-bye. Thank you, Bill. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Bill.